Chen. I come from a little town in Southwest Virginia, but I grew up with a family that was afflicted with Huntington's disease. And since that time, also know another family that through an adoption where they had no way 40 years ago of knowing what was going on, that family now has learned that it also has Huntington's disease. So in your testimony, you mentioned there are targeted therapies that directly address the underlying genetic causes of diseases such as Huntington's and ALS. What are these therapies, and what does the future look for them?
You know, there are a lot of therapies out there that are still being developed, and the targeted therapies in particular are there to address, as you mentioned, the underlying genetic mechanisms. And as we learn more in innovation and move towards sort of cell and gene therapy, I think we have more potential curative treatments down the road for us.
You know, the situation, particularly with Huntington's, is so dire that one member of that family has told me that he doesn't want to be tested. He's afraid to find out whether he has the disease because there's nothing that can be done for it. That said, do you think that some of the provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act, particularly the confiscatory and what I believe and have argued longly, unconstitutional provisions as related to the fines if you don't cooperate with the federal government and negotiate the way they want you to, do you think that will hinder or enhance advancement of therapies for people facing these types of rare diseases?
You know, the IRA has a carve-out for drugs with a sole indication for a rare disease. The challenge here is drug manufacturers who enter this space consider the entire pipeline of indications that they might get approval for. So what the IRA does is essentially disincentivizes drug manufacturers from entering exploring a drug where the first indication is a rare disease, and it also further disincentivizes drug manufacturers from exploring further follow-on indications, which is a very cost-effective way of doing R&D for the rare disease space.
So let me see if I can translate into layman's terms. If you're a manufacturer of medications and doing the research, and you have one that treats a genetic disorder, and some of your think tank team says it might help Huntington's, you're afraid to try it because then that would trap you into possibly having confiscatory fines or penalties put on you by Medicare or Medicaid. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. You are potentially subject to price negotiations.
So you're better off if you don't look. Just keep it as the one disease. Okay. Dr. Flop, Huntington's disease, as we've discussed, is an inherited disorder. In your testimony, you mentioned the adeno-associated virus, which is a vector that targets specific cause of a disease and changes the way the cell functions. This is used to treat inherited diseases without treatment, which Huntington's would be. Are you aware of any efforts to use this or to research this related to Huntington's disease?
Yes, Congressman, there are. In fact, there have been several proof of concept studies using AAV to deliver a form of RNA interference. Huntington is a disease where you have to silence the bad gene and not simply add back a good copy of the gene. So there was, in fact, two efforts that I'm aware of. One was actually at University of Iowa by Dr. Beverly Davis using AAV to deliver this technology. The other is a series of studies being done at our institution at UMass Chan Medical School under the leadership of Dr. Neil Aronin, who is one of the people pushing the envelope forward for both gene-based therapies, that is recombinant viruses, and oligonucleotide-based therapies, that is synthesized stretches of DNA or RNA, that either one of which is designed to downregulate that offending gene.
So let me ask you the tough question. If it's your friend who's afraid to get the test to find out whether or not he's carrying that gene for Huntington's, do you tell him that the new treatment looks promising enough to get the test, or should he just go on living his life in somewhat, he's always worried about it, but more blissful because he thinks that he probably couldn't handle the stress?
Well, Congressman, unfortunately, I've been asked this question at different times, not specific to Huntington, but to many of the diseases that affect kids that I treat. I have learned not to make any guarantees, but I will say there is reason to still have hope for conditions like this, because if we do what we can do, industry does what they can do, the foundations do what they can do, I am convinced we are going to beat most of these diseases in the end.
I appreciate that. My time is up. I have lots of questions for the record. I yield back.